To continue onwards about Jane Eyre, when Jane Eyre decides to leave Lowood School, if she hadn't been an orphan child or a child who didn't have that many social connection other than the parents who have died, or when she actually applied for the governess job at Thornfield. Before that, her mentor and mother like figure in Lowood School, which was Miss Temple, she had decided to marry someone in her middle age and she leaves Lowood School. And because Miss Temple now leaves middle age, or she was in her 30s, I believe. So when Miss Temple leaves as a result of her marriage, now Miss Temple being the closest mother like and friend like figure for her, she is now also lost in that area because she doesn't have any closer friendships. If she had built one of her close friends, which was Helen Burns, she dies of consumption. So after Helen Burns' death, maybe she was scarred enough, or maybe the other kids were not as close to her as she wanted to be close to them. So for whatever reason, she didn't end up making deeper friendships than just with Miss Temple. And as a result, when Miss Temple marries and leaves Lowood School, she also now has this thought of leaving the school because she doesn't have those deeper connections or any other connections that can tie her deeply or emotionally at the school. If in some alternate scenario there was some student that she got very deeply and emotionally tied towards, then like how Miss Temple stayed in the school for so many decades, like that she could have also ended up staying in Lowood School itself for a longer time. But because there were different reasons for her to leave, some of which I discussed in part 1, those reasons combined with her own loneliness, combined with the fact that while on the outside not having a family and stable family life makes an orphan's life a difficult journey in life, it is also a blessing in disguise because it leaves you the opportunity to make new friendships and develop new connections, which is what happened to Jane when she took the step now to leave Lowood and go into taking the job as a governess job for Adele. And when she takes up the job for Adele, she doesn't know anything about the family's history. So slowly, when she reaches Thornfield, we get the history of what is going on with Adele, who is her student, and she meets other characters in living in Thornfield. And then eventually she understands that Adele's guardian is the one who's paying her, but she has never met Mr. Rochester initially. And then the meeting with Mr. Rochester is designed in a very surreal way, in which they meet each other on the road when she has gone for a walk one day. So that is how Jane ends up meeting Mr. Rochester, who is supposed to be her love interest in the story of Jane Eyre. But when you read the story of Jane Eyre and you see the story of love that develops between Jane and Mr. Rochester, you will see that the love that develops between them is a very different kind of love that develops between them versus the love that was developing between Catherine and Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights. And that's where the characters differ completely in their love experience. There is no instant attraction, there is nothing like attraction present initially in the wordings and choices of the characters. Neither of the characters, Jane is just doing her dutiful job as a governess, that when Mr. Rochester starts staying in Thornfield, she visits him or sits with him in the evenings or spends times with him during the evening time, merely because he suggests that of her. She has no romantic interest towards him. She has no interest towards attracting another man in her life. She's just been like a dutiful governess or a dependent. She was an indirect dependent on him, right? Because he's paying her salary. So someone who pays your salary, if they ask you, can you spend time in the evening with me or chat in the evening about what you do, what are your hobbies, you are just being friendly towards them as a human being, kind towards them as a human being, and the fact that you are dependent on them, right, for food and clothing and finances. So that was the kind of relationship that was going on in her mind. For her, it was nowhere in the story you will see she's the kind of woman who is flirting with a man or setting the steps to trap a man into falling in love with her. She's not doing or building anything like that. And this is what, if you are on a twin flame journey, you will be having that kind of interaction, that level of interaction only with the opposite gender. If you are having a twin flame journey, you may not know you are on a twin flame journey. According to me, Jane Eyre's story is a twin flame journey story, or high level divine soulmate counterpart related, ascension related story. But you don't know when you are young, when you are in your 20s, that you are on a ascension journey, or you are on a higher evolution journey, or you are on a journey towards meeting your twin flame. None of it is there in your awareness when you are that young. All you are doing is you are experiencing life, and you are just experiencing life at a normal level like everyone else who is also experiencing these circumstances. And just that you become a twin flame, or you become you get into the ascension path when, depending on your circumstances of your life, the choices that you're making makes you go towards the ascension path, takes you towards the twin flame journey, depending on how you have interacted, what choice you have made, what are the consciousness driven choices you are making, what are the morality and ethics related choices you are making in life. That is what determines you, your journey. So, because in contrast to Jane, we also see the other women in the locality there who know that Edward Rochester is the rich man. Even Jane is not a stupid girl, and she has been raised in a similar circumstance as a Thornfield family, just that she had only a brief experience of that life with the Reeds. So she knows how it is to live in a higher socioeconomic status as well as in a lower socioeconomic status. Both of those life experiences she had had before coming to Thornfield. So she understands who's a rich person, who's not a rich person. She also understands if a person has had Adele's past. When she learns about Adele's past, Adele is a ward of Mr. Rochester, and the woman that Mr. Rochester was sleeping with in Paris, that woman was not faithful towards him. So Mr. Rochester doesn't believe that Adele is his daughter, but that woman claims that Adele is his daughter. So while he doesn't believe that Adele is his daughter, he still takes care of the child when that woman either passes away or has some other thing going on with her and she leaves Adele. So he takes care of that child simply because he feels responsibility towards that child. And a person who's dating like this, who's had all these kind of high society related, life related affairs and things like that, so she understands definitely that Mr. Rochester must be socioeconomically very much richer than her to be pursuing these kind of life. And he is not always living in Thornfield either, so he goes and lives somewhere else as well. So while she understands that he must be richer, then he has parties in his homes where she gets invited to join the parties in the evening or weekends when they have these socializing activities. And there also she can see that he's highly coveted by other women, and there are women who are vying for his attention. In fact, there's a whole rumor that starts going around, and the other person who really wants to now covet his Mr. Rochester's attention because he's a rich person and she wants to marry him and is flirting with him is Blanche Ingram. And Blanche Ingram is doing that because she does want to marry a rich guy as a future husband prospect, and she is calculatingly and devising things in such a way so that Mr. Rochester can fall for her. And she also sees that Jane might be her competitor, so she tries to even belittle Jane in subtle manner as well. So this is what happens in, this is something, a normal life experience. Any one of us who's an ordinary citizen or leading a normal life path journey will also experience in our life path. But then what makes Jane Eyre's life a different life path than an ordinary one is based on the choices she made during these interactions. Though Blanche tried to make her jealous, she wasn't getting jealous about it. In fact, she was very ready to believe also when some rumors started floating around that Mr. Rochester is going to get married, or when Mr. Rochester himself tells her that Jane, I think I'm going to get married soon, and things like that. At that time, she never presumes that or even thinks that she's in the consideration for his love interest. She assumes that he is going to marry Blanche Ingram or some of the other ladies who had come to the household parties. She believes the rumors also about him, because again, she's not a greedy woman, she's not a one who's grasping for another male's attention, and that is where she is different from other women. She's not just pursuing, and she is a lonely woman as well. She's in fact more lonelier than the other women. Other women have friends, other women have family, other women have a family they can fall back on for a while until they meet the right spouse. So every one of the other women who are vying for Mr. Rochester's attention, they could have vied for his attention based on mutual interest, based on common compatibilities, and rather than basing it on the fact that he is rich. So because the moment he's not rich, what will they do? That is something they need to realize, and are they realizing it or not is part of the storyline as well that unfolds in the story. And then and Mr. Rochester did have a past with cheating partners who were using him for money. So because he's had all those past, he is testing every woman who's interested in him in a way he can test them. So he does test Jane also, he does test Blanche Ingram as well. And in the big background, what is happening in Thornfield is also the background where excuse me, sorry, in Jane Eyre, what we also see in the background is there's sometimes some noise that is coming from upstairs rooms, and rooms where Jane is not allowed access to. And the housekeeper of the home and other people say that it is someone named Grace Poole who stays there, and she's making the noise. And when she meets Grace Poole seems like a very strange lady, but she seems like a very stoic kind of a personality to her. So Jane just observes it. We don't get Jane's thought about what is going on there. But later on, we realize that one of the times when a guest has come to stay there, and suddenly Jane is woken up in the middle of the night by Mr. Rochester to come and help him. She finally meets the person who's responsible for all this noise, which is Bertha Mason. And Bertha Mason's brother was visiting them. And Bertha Mason's brother, when he visits Mr. Rochester, and he was there to visit his sister, he had been attacked by his sister because his sister is a very crazy woman. And because she's a mentally ill woman who attacks people, that's why she has a caretaker, Grace Poole, which is what eventually Jane realizes. And Bertha, having attacked, now I think she attacks both Mr. Rochester and Mason or something, and there's some intrigue going on there where Mr. Rochester keeps her away from the intrigue. So while she realizes that some secret is there that Mr. Rochester hasn't revealed to her, she doesn't know the details of that secret. And then Mr. Mason leaves, and later on, during that same time, actually, Mr. Rochester has been considering marrying Jane, because he was analyzing actually Jane in contrast to the other socializing ladies to see whether Jane is, and he, in some of his conversations also to Jane, does tell her that how she's very different from the life experiences he has had in the past. And he also mentions in one of the favorite lines of the book, I don't remember the lines, but the gist of it was he is had a very darkness filled experience in his life, and to him Jane's attitude and mentality in life makes it seem as if Jane is a pure soul and light in his life. And this is where, twin flame or higher level soulmate experiences will show up in your life, where if you have experienced a lot of darkness, another person who will be your ideal soulmate to you or life partner potential to you will in contrast have a life where they will be bringing the light to you in your life. And actually, if you look at Jane Eyre also, while she never confesses the depth of her love to him, in a way he confesses his love to her eventually, you can see in the stories unfolding itself how he is a contrasting light to her as well. Because for her, what did she need? She wanted a home, she wanted a caring, someone who cares deeply about her. These are the experiences she was wanting in a spouse. And in between all this story narrative, what also happens is her aunt falls ill and requests to see her because she's ill. And Jane, being a dutiful girl and not holding a grudge for the cruelty she faced at the Reeds' homes, decides to take a break and goes to visit her aunt when she is sick. So when she goes there, she also discovers some things related to her past that her aunt had hid about her. The aunt, I think, does tell her that she has hid something from her, but the aunt is still cruel towards her. But despite the aunt being cruel, because Jane, again, this is the difference between a soul who is on an ascension journey and a soul who is just normally leading a unconscious life. If she was an unconscious individual, when the aunt was, or an immature individual, when the aunt is again cruel to her when she goes to visit the aunt before she dies, she could have held bitterness in her in her heart about her aunt, or she could have held a bitterness in such a way that she could have cruelly treated the aunt's kids. But she doesn't do that. She's nice to everyone despite the past history of them not being nice to her. She is still nice to them, she's still kind towards them. She helps her sisters arrange for the funeral or whatever dutiful things as a niece or a daughter she could have done for her aunt. She does all that before she leaves her aunt and comes back to Mr. Rochester. And this break is designed, again, these kind of breaks are also going to be designed in a twin flame journey with twin flames, or people who are in a higher ascension journey in their love life. These kind of breaks are put by the universe to make you test, do you really love this person, do you really care for this person, do you really miss this person. And this was designed as a gap in, now if Jane had been very selfish and she had not left for meeting Mrs. Reed, then what would have happened is this test of Mr. Rochester's love for her wouldn't have unfolded then. Something else would have to unfold for him to understand how deeply he loves her or how deeply he misses her. But because this, she was choosing the higher soul purpose path, she chose the higher soul purpose path to not be selfish, and she went and visited her aunt during her last days. And then she came back, and because she has taken this higher path, the higher path of love also unfolded for her, in the sense that one way it unfolded was what opened the doors because of her unselfishness. Other people also who could have been selfish now karmically were unselfish towards her, which unfolds next in the story. One is and the direct consequence of her leaving was that Mr. Rochester missed her more, so he understood her value in his life. And because he understood that of her value in his life, and he understood how deeply he loves her, I think after that only he confesses his love towards her, and then they decide to get married. And then Mr. Mason's incidents, I don't know whether it unfolds after Mrs. Reed's death. Possibly it unfolds after Mrs. Reed's death. But on the day of Jane's wedding to Mr. Rochester, here again is a higher level soul journey path question that will arise for a soul who's on a ascension journey, where or even if you're not on an ascension journey, this question will arise in your life related to the questions that arose in Jane's life the day she was getting married to Mr. Rochester. She was happily thinking that today she will be married to him, and she was ready to marry him because she was in love with him, he was in love with her. And she had actually got two premonitions already of something bad that could turn up in their future. One was via a dream she had, where she dreamt, I think, that one of the trees in the garden is going to be split in two. So that dream itself is a this is also someone, when you are in an ascension journey or a twin flame, you will get these kind of visions as a warning also about the next potential future that might happen to you. So the tree splitting was a warning of their potential splitting. And there was another dream also that happened, which happened to Mr. Rochester or her, I don't know, I don't remember right now. I think it was Mr. Rochester who dreamed that maybe Jane will leave him or something. So both of them got that premonition of something might happen in the future, but they confessed their love towards each other despite that premonition. And this is another thing that happened was, in Jane's room, the veil that she was going to wear during her wedding, someone came and burnt her veil. And I think also someone came and burnt Mr. Rochester's room also. So then she saves Mr. Rochester. And these two incidences, they happen maybe not on the same day. I think they happen 2 different days. But these are all hints of something wrong in Mr. Rochester's life that Jane doesn't know about, which gets revealed when they are getting married. That time it gets revealed that Bertha Mason is actually Mr. Rochester's legal wife. And he's already married. So because polygamy is not allowed in England, Bertha Mason's brother actually then comes and presents the evidence that Bertha Mason is his Mr. Rochester's wife. That's why Jane shouldn't marry him. And now this is where the twin flame journeys, next soul shock happens to Jane, because it is a shocking thing and it is also a awakening related experience for Jane, because now she has to decide, can she stay and can she consciously marry someone knowing that he's already married to someone else. And she has met the wife, so it's not that she doesn't know that the wife isn't crazy. Now she even, in fact, if she has enough sense, she will put two and two together to understand also that her veil was likely burnt by that wife. Mr. Rochester's room was likely burnt by that wife, because she's seen the wife attack other people, right? So, and injure other people in a very grievous manner. That injury also she had seen when Bertha had attacked so personally her brother. So at that time, when she has seen what Bertha is capable of doing, so she knows like Mr. Rochester's pain. But again, there is a question of, can you, according to law, she has also been religiously brought up. So according to religion and also according to her own consciousness, if you are a higher level twin flame or a higher level, as you are on a higher level ascension journey, this is the inner work that she did that day. Like for 4-5 hours, she just didn't marry him first. She went into her room, locked herself in her room, cried about it, and possibly also did a inner work about it at those 6, 7, 8, 10 hours that she spent in her room, where she didn't want to talk to Mr. Rochester, where she had to have a conversation about this changing circumstance, a thing that she didn't realize about. She had to make that consciousness driven choice of what should she do, knowing that he's married to a mad woman. What should she do, knowing that being married to someone else, she will never be legally or in the eyes of God also actually be his wife. And what should she consciously do, that despite loving him and this being the only life she has known, for only happy life in fact that she had in her life, the few years that she had spent with Mr. Rochester and Adele, it was a really happy and comfort filled life for her. What should she do about this comfort filled life? These are the 3 choices she has to make, because she could have decided to not marry him, but she could have still stayed there as the governess of Adele, right? She could have chosen to marry him and be continue as if Bertha doesn't exist at all, or she could have done what she did eventually. And out of which, if she had married him and continued in the journey as his wife, and with ignoring the fact that he's married to Bertha, which is what Mr. Rochester actually wanted her to do, and he told her that he would have told her the truth, but he wanted to tell her the truth only after marrying her, not before marrying her. And after telling her the truth after marrying her, he wanted to hide the truth because he knew that legally and in the eyes of God, this is not in that time period of life considered to be a moral choice or the right choice, right? That's why he didn't want to tell her about his first wife. But he should have, if he was also on the ascension journey, which he was actually, he should have actually told her about his wife and then made her decide about it. And then if he hadn't hidden the truth about it, then maybe Jane could have made a different choice, who knows. And whether that is a right moral choice or not, in given the circumstance of Mr. Rochester's life with Bertha, it just becomes God would have forgiven her if she had married Mr. Rochester, because firstly they're high level twin flames, secondly because his wife is mentally ill, thirdly because slowly England's law in the future does change to the fact that if you are married to someone who is mentally ill, you have cause for divorce from such spouses. But in the time period at which Jane Eyre's story is unfolding, possibly that law hadn't existed in England, that if you have a mentally ill spouse, a divorce can be sought from the church. Those things possibly were not present in as an option to Mr. Rochester. So as a result only he had this mad wife in his life, right? But Jane also has, if I consider Mr. Rochester and Jane as twin flame counterparts. Now if you are a twin flame counterpart now struggling with this dilemma where one of the counterparts is making a soul harming choice or a karmic choice that will now bite them later in the future, the job of the twin flame counterpart is to bring back the right soul level, karmic level balance into your choices. So Mr. Rochester so far has continued in his life despite being married to Bertha. What did he do actually that was karmically wrong? Now let's examine that first. The things that he did karmically wrong was, he had been married off to Bertha because Bertha was very rich. So his parents had got him married to a older woman and a woman with some illnesses, but a woman with a lot of property because they wanted her property. So as a result of marrying Bertha, while his life was ruined in the marital way, his life was not ruined in a socioeconomic way. He gained a lot of socioeconomic advantages by marrying Bertha. And because he gained a lot of socioeconomic advantages by marrying Bertha, and if he had to make a right conscious decision that this marriage is technically not a good marriage for him, and if he had made a higher soul purpose choice, his soul being the same soul as, like, twin flames are essentially same soul in two different bodies. So how Jane decides, in the storyline of Jane Eyre to leave Mr. Rochester, that is what Mr. Rochester should have done with Bertha. He should have left the property. He did try to leave, but he didn't leave the property. He left his wife, but he didn't leave the financial ties to his wife. So which is where Mr. Rochester went wrong. He didn't leave the financial ties to the person who he can't do justice as a husband. He doesn't love her. There is also a book, I think Wild Sargasso Sea is the book's name, which explores the life of Bertha with Mr. Rochester, and I have not read that book, but the gist of the book that I had read, I understood that and also I have dated a guy who was younger than me, and I was getting into a very crazy I was feeling very insecure in that relationship because the guy was younger to me, and he did make me feel in a way very crazy because he was always manipulating me into making me seem like the villain in the relationship, which is something covert narcissistic people or covert abusers or covert manipulative people do. Like, if they want to break up a relationship with you, they will make the circumstances around you so tough and so horrible in a daily interaction with them that you will be forced to either get angry or forced to react badly with them or forced to leave the relationship, because those people do not have the courage to say that I do not want this relationship, let's end this relationship. Because again, England's laws, I don't know about England law about whether divorce was allowed or not during Mr. Rochester's time, but let's assume that divorce was not available, that's why he couldn't explore that option. Or is it is also possible that divorce was available if you became a Protestant, but divorce is not available if you were a Catholic. Something like that could have been going on, I don't know. Or even if the divorce was available for him to take that route, he didn't take the divorce route because he wanted to enjoy the luxuries and money he got from the consequence of marrying Bertha. So all of these are karmically a spiritual harm he has done against Bertha, because all three choices he made were spiritually harmful towards Bertha. Because if he had actually dissolved the marriage, then she's not soul tied to him in a legal manner also, and because the marriage has now been dissolved, she's the responsibility of her brother. So her brother and father now have to take care of her, and if he dissolves the marriage and lets go of the property, second karmic tie to her is also lost. And finally, but instead of doing these two better options, he just ran from her and still used her money. So which makes that soul, even if she is a crazy soul, and she couldn't possibly, before he leaves her, she could have been a normal human being, or just a little bit borderline personality disorder type or something. Whereas she became an extremely cruel person because she faced a cruel backlash from someone who was supposed to be her partner in life. So then she became a cruel person. Then she became this person who wanted to, because she was in so much pain, she wanted to inflict that pain on everyone else around her. So when he has left her and he is still using her money, it is double disadvantage that is going on with her. And he's leaving her and doing what? He's leaving her and sleeping with other women. He's leaving her and testing other women to see whether they would be good spouse or partners to me. And why did he meet Adele's mother also? Because Adele's mother and other women like her, or Blanche Ingram, they kept getting attracted to him in his life, is because he is been cheating on his wife as well. He is also been disloyal to a wife. He's also using someone for their money. So what he has been doing, he's also attracting. That's why those kind of women consistently in his life. And when slowly he was learning the lesson that this is a not good thing, or maybe he also did one karmic good thing where even if Adele is not his daughter, he's ready to take care of a child, where he did one good thing against a woman. So that way he cleared a little bit of his karma. Next karma he was clearing was when he met Jane and he gave her a good enough pay, or he was treating her as an equal despite her being coming now from a more poverty stricken life. He was still considering her to be a equal. So these two ways he slightly cleared the karma related to Bertha, but he hadn't completely cleared the karma related to Bertha. And because Jane Eyre is his divine twin flame counterpart, if you assume that, which is why she now has to make the most difficult route only, because the best route that Mr. Rochester should have done, he didn't do in his past. And because he didn't do it in his past, it has to be now done by Jane only. And that's why only Jane gets guided to completely leave the monetary ties to Mr. Rochester, as well as the job security and comfort she was getting from Mr. Rochester, as well as the love also. She has to reject his love as well, because they are all tied to Bertha. Indirectly, Bertha is the one who is paying her. Even though Mr. Rochester is giving the money is coming from Bertha. So because the money is coming from Bertha, she has to do the justice to Bertha only. That's why she leaves as a governess, because she did have a choice to stay there, but she made the higher karmic consequence choice that she doesn't want to use that woman's money. She doesn't want to use and abuse her further. She also understands Bertha's pain. Like, you imagine if her roles were reversed, if she was Bertha and Bertha was Jane. That is how you develop empathy towards another person. That is how you develop a higher karmic understanding about a karmic in your life. Bertha was Mr. Rochester's karmic. Bertha was also Jane Eyre's karmic, but they were also Bertha's karmic. And she had to make the right karmic choice as a result of this, that even though Bertha is burning her veil, even though Bertha is jealous of her, she has a very much right to be jealous about her, because she was Mr. Rochester's wife, and what Mr. Rochester is showering over other women or Jane is something that was actually by law her right. It's just that he didn't want to execute that right, and he didn't want to even end that right with her, which he should have done. If he had done that, then if he had completely let go of all the riches associated with Bertha, this difficult a life wouldn't have transpired for Mr. Rochester, or this complexity level wouldn't have happened for him. But because he couldn't let go of that, this complexity arose, and because this complexity arose, Jane had to take the decision of leaving the comfort of Thornfield, leaving the job she has. She has to now start from scratch, because this is what Mr. Rochester, as a same soul as her, was supposed to do, but he didn't get to do it. But Jane has more resilience to do it. Why? Because she has been raised in poverty stricken conditions. So because she has been raised in poverty stricken conditions, she can now leave the luxury as well. She had that much resilience in her to understand that leaving this was a better karmic choice, better soul aligned choice to amend for the bad karma they have created by, and she was responsible in that bad karma the moment she confessed love to Mr. Rochester, and when the moment Mr. Rochester decided to drag her into the bad karma related to Bertha, where before ending things with Bertha, he shouldn't have dragged any other women in his life, which is a lesson he needed to learn. And because he didn't learn that lesson, she had to make this harsh judgment of leaving him. And then, and it was not simply about leaving him. She did love him, but if you love someone at a higher level, you have to also make the tougher karmic choices for them or on behalf of them as well. And that's why she had to make this tough karmic choice on behalf of him and behalf of her as well. And then also make the choice of being, in a way where completely destitute now. And you see also, she leaves the house. She doesn't even ask him for paying her for the money he owes her for the work she has already done. She just leaves with a little bit money in her pocket and nothing, and maybe like a bag of clothes. But she's so distorted or disturbed by all the circumstances that happen. I think she loses her clothes also. So she essentially becomes completely destitute, completely poverty stricken, and completely at the mercy of elements. And she begs also someone for some food in the meantime. For a few days, she goes hungry also for a few days before she faints in the house of some people who are good people. She was just observing them from the window when she saw they were good people, and God also knows these are good people, so she faints in front of some good strangers. And then when she recovers in front of them, and they are a family of one brother and two sisters. And here see the karma, where she was good towards her Mrs. Reed's siblings, like Mrs. Reed's children who were her cousins. Those cousins were two sisters and a brother, were not kind to her. Here the opposite happens. The two sisters and a brother in this family, who are strangers to her, are really kind to her, are really helpful towards her. They help her in recovery. Not only help her in recovery, they see that she is highly educated, so they start learning together. All of them are very educated people. They all learn together. Her St. John Rivers, or St. John, his name is spelled St. John, but I always call him St. John in my mind. So St. John is the one who was also studying to be a missionary in Africa. And he sees that Jane has a tongue for learning different languages, so he starts teaching her also some different languages. He was going to be a missionary somewhere in Africa or India. So because he was going to be a missionary, he wanted a partner who could, support him in his missionary work. So he has some altruistic motive in teaching her and helping her. But the other two sisters, they have zero altruistic motive, zero motivation. They are just nice to her because they are nice women. They're not nice to her because they have any intention of getting something from Jane. But St. John is in more interested in her because he does have a selfish motivation against her. And then during the time that they live there, I think one day it so happens that St. John proposes to her, because he sees she's a very structured woman, she's a learned woman, she will be a good missionary wife. So seeing all this, he proposes to her, And now Jane again has a choice, a higher level choice, whether she should marry someone just because someone has asked her to marry him, and knowing that she loves Mr. Rochester very deeply. And this is where now she made again a good karmic higher level choice, that knowing that she still loves Mr. Rochester, knowing that no one else can be there in her heart than Mr. Rochester, she just doesn't want to get married to someone else just because someone is proposing to her. And the second thing here, again, she makes a decision on behalf of her higher karmic soul purpose, and also on behalf of St. John as well, because St. John, even though he is looking at the practical aspects of seeing that practically Jane is a very good role model, missionary wife kind of a personality type, he's making the decision based on practicality, not out of love. And Jane knows at that time that St. John is in love with Rosamond Oliver, who is both of them are deeply in love with each other. But while Rosamond is deeply in love with St. John is deeply in love with Rosamond, because Rosamond comes from a richer family. He knows that for his missionary work she will not be a good wife, and as a result, even though he's in love with her, he wants a practical wife. But when you have a practical wife, while Jane also actually, I don't know if she suggests this or thinks about, contemplates this, that she's ready to do missionary work with him, but not as his wife. Because when you, again, when you get married to someone, you get karmically tied to them at a much more deeper level than if you are not married to them, if you are just friends with them. Because if you get married to them, there will be sexual problems, there will be other love related karma and love related soul ties that will be created, the love of a spouse related soul ties that will be created, which will be a bad karmic choice. So she didn't want that consequence of that bad karmic choice. And St. John is also a very, and this is where when I said some repeat of Emily Bronte's characters were there in a different life, you can say, in this story of like you can say that the story of Jane Eyre is a parallel life to the life of the story of Catherine and Heathcliff. Why? Because Catherine and Heathcliff now again are presented in this story as a different human being, where Heathcliff-like personality is St. John's personality. And St. John is also a very cold, calculating personality, just like Heathcliff. It's just that in past life, he did a lot of bad karma. So this life, because he has done a lot of bad karma in that past life, he is getting a more luxurious life. He got a more well-settled life with people loving him. And he has a karma to clear off all the harm he had done to the souls as Heathcliff. So that's why he is now a saintly person wanting to do saintly stuff, or stuff where he's not pursuing greed. Instead, he wants to lead a life where other than greed, other than money, he's pursuing other things. And because he had learned his lesson as Heathcliff like person, where Heathcliff wanted to marry a richer woman like Catherine, Heathcliff was in love with a richer woman like Catherine, here Heathcliff Catherine's pattern is again being played by St. John and Rosamond Oliver, where again they are both again and deeply in love with each other. But again, because of the soul purpose related choice only, they have a different soul purpose choice, they have a different soul purpose journey that is meant to manifest for them. Here in this life, Heathcliff, now if Heathcliff is only St. John, Heathcliff's soul has realized that how much ever a person with riches comes in front of him, he can't marry the person with riches if he has to clear the soul karma related to the torture he and cruelty he had subject some people to. So now he was now going, that's why, to Africa and India to help those souls who are in abject poverty, who are in abject misery, to make up for the karma he didn't make up in a previous life. That's why in this life he has a strong goal now to do missionary work. And for him, but he's still again that unidirectional personality like Heathcliff, where once he targets something, that is all he wants, which is something now Jane understands about him. And how does Jane understand? It is very likely that Jane could have been either little Kathy from previous life. So in this life, instead of little Kathy being his dependent, direct financial dependent, here Jane comes up to him as an indirect dependent, as a voluntary dependent. where there he pulled Kathy Linton as his dependent in Jane Eyre's in Emily Bronte's story. But here he doesn't pull Jane as his dependent initially. Jane inadvertently falls into on their doorsteps, and that's how she becomes his dependent. But he does want to pull her as his dependent in Africa. But knowing if she has memory as Kathy of the past lifetime, soul memory, she doesn't have conscious memory as Kathy, but if she has some soul memory that with this person, if I love this person, that love will not be, a good loving experience. That's why she says also no. So she has two reasons to say no. One is two or three reasons. One is that she understands St. John's personality type. She understands her personality type. She understands both her and St. John, while as learning students can compatibly learn with each other while coexisting in a family life. They can still functionally coexist as, in case of Heathcliff Kathy Linton, they were just functionally able to manage a household together, but there was no love existing between them. Similarly, here also her soul completely rejects St. John, because she knows that St. John will never love her. He doesn't have an ounce of love for her soul. So he's like superficially kind to everyone, but he doesn't love many people. That was his soul nature. So he doesn't love, and if he had indeed loved his own sisters, he would have taken as missionaries or taken the responsibility of taking them with him, because they were also, learned women. So they could have also helped in missionary work. But if he was only interested in missionary work and devoted to just missionary work, he could have taken his sisters also with him if they were interested. I don't know if they were interested or not. That part is not explored, but he didn't even consider any of his other sisters as life partnership or just brother sister going for missionary work like thing. He didn't consider that. And secondly, he wanted her because, again, Heathcliff still has, if he's Heathcliff only as St. John, then he still has that element in him to not think of the benefit of another human being. The one who he knows the least, and the one who he sees functionally as a useful person to be with, that is whom he wants with him, which is a very toxic, again it is another toxic trait, right? You can't just want it's like then he's treating Catherine like not Catherine, but yeah, it's Kathy Linton. If Jane Eyre is Kathy Linton now, and Kathy Linton's soul, he has already mistreated many people as Heathcliff in past life in the Wuthering Heights storyline. So if that kind of a lifetime had happened with those characters, some of those characters know that how he can have the potential to just use someone for his gain. So that using someone for his gain aspect had not completely left Heathcliff's soul. It had left it partly, where in the parts where he didn't want to use people, he didn't want to use his two sisters for his missionary work. Neither did he want to use Rosamund Oliver, who he loves, for that missionary work. But he still wants to use Jane for his missionary work and subject her to cruel conditions, where without loving her, without care for her, and which was again, a karma that would have repeated of their past life if Jane Eyre had loved it. And because, and you will see there's like a very spooky, like a intuitive kind of a thing that happens in that whole interaction, where she rejects him so much that she realizes that she shouldn't even be dependent on his household anymore for stay, because she had assumed when she was staying with them that she was just being caretaken by good people who were just wanting to be good towards her. But she realizes there was an ulterior motive in St. John's heart against her. And as soon as she realizes that ulterior motive, as soon as she realizes the way St. John speaks to her awakens possibly the past life memory in her of what it would mean to be married to him or stay in the same household as him in abject conditions of poverty or misery or other things where love would never be present in their interaction. her soul knew that what would happen, and that's why she runs away again from Sinjin as well. And then she goes and rents another cottage from Rosamund Oliver and lives there in that cottage for a while. And while she lives there, then the next part of the story unfolds, where it turns out actually Sinjin and the two sisters were her cousins only from another uncle. So like Mr. Reed was her mother's brother, the Rivers was also Mr. Rivers was also their mother's another brother. And just because she was an orphan, she didn't know about the Mr. Rivers family, so she didn't know that Sinjin and Martha and Diana, they were her cousins only. So if she had lived with them, it's not as if, you know, even though it she happened to live with them as a stranger, it turns out that she is actually their sibling as well, a cousin as well, a family member as well. So they were not doing very highly altruistic thing, they were only partially, turns out they were doing a partially altruistic thing, because they were upkeeping their own cousin. And that's why when Sinjin discovers that, Sinjin wants her back in their life, but she rejects them. And also because of Sinjin or because of other reasons, somehow finally Jane ends up getting the inheritance that she was supposed to gain from her uncle from her dad's side. Her dad's side uncle had left her some property, and that property now eventually lands up with Jane, which then gives Jane a leg up in life to have now a comfortable life. Now she will not have to be financially dependent on any man. And that money, as you can see, this is a karmic journey of Jane. So because it was a karmic journey, she had to reject many dependencies on other men, many dependencies on false, which are going to be false dependencies, because they were going to be devoid of love. Or in case of Sinjin, it was going to be devoid of love. In case of Mr. Rochester, it would have had love, but it would have been devoid of morals and higher paths of ascension journey that should unfold for them, that wouldn't unfold if she married him or if she stayed with him. So because she rejected all these, closed all these doors of wrong ways of living life with Mr. Rochester as well as Sinjin, and she didn't want to be financially dependent on other people, she was consistently ever since she gained her adulthood, she was consistently working towards her upkeep. She starts teaching children again in when she's living in Rosamund Oliver's cottage as well. She rents the cottage and lives there. She starts teaching again, so she only very briefly is again dependent on the Rivers, but again she leaves them and has her own independence. So because she was always consistently working towards her independence, both independence as a soul doing the right karmic choices, as well as a soul who is making the right financial choices. She was never greedy about money, she was never greedy about security and things that normal women or normal people who are afraid to be alone pursue. Many women other than Jane could have easily accepted Sinjin's proposal just because they want a man in their life. Many women could have accepted Mr. Rochester's not just because they want a man in their life, because they can see that the man is in love with them, as well as see that they are going to have a lot of financial advantages after marrying that man. Many women would have done that. But then if you're doing what normal ordinary people do, or ordinary people do out of greed or need, then you are not on a higher twin flame journey. You can't be on a higher twin flame journey if you're consistently doing things based on normal greed or need. So you come on the higher ascension journey or higher twin flame path related journey when the decision making of many points of your life are outside of greed, outside of need, are within the context of karmic choices, higher soul level choices, higher choices both for your soul and another soul. When you make those kind of choices based on both the soul's higher purpose or higher path that should unfold for them, that is when you are making the higher level choices related to the twin flame journey or ascension journey. And she kept doing it consistently again and again and again every time she made a higher level soul choice in her story. And then After this, the final higher level soul choice she made was, even though there is another thing where I think she comes back to Sinjan's home again or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. After she gets the money, she wants to share the money with the people who had, with the rivers, because they had helped her when she was in distress. So I think she shares some of the money with her sisters and brother. And I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to reread this and I'll clarify it in my description section about this aspect of the story. But because there is an interaction with another interaction with Sinjin. Again, Sinjin proposes to her, and this time when Sinjin proposes to her, she also hears Mr. Rochester's voice, Jane, Jane, Jane. Now this is also something when you have when you are a twin flame, while it seems like a very spooky experience or a surreal experience that was described in the book, but this experience of being called out by your twin flame can also happen to someone who is a high level twin flame. So when she listens and hears Jane, 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 she just feels in her soul that she needs to connect with Mr. Rochester. So what she does then, she leaves Sinjan's house, rivers, and all her life there. She goes back to Thornfield, and when she goes back to Thornfield, when she reaches Thornfield, she sees that Thornfield is completely burnt down, and she's shocked seeing that. And she had arranged for room and board in a nearby place. So when she goes to the nearby room and boarding place, she finds out all the past history of what had happened. And it turned out that after she had left Mr. Rochester, one of the days, Bertha was so mad that, who had the propensity to harm others, she decided to burn down the whole Thornfield home. And she had burned down the whole home, and everyone now doesn't live in Thornfield anymore. Instead, Mr. Rochester lives somewhere else. And I think from them she finds out where Mr. Rochester lives now, in a small cottage, in a small farmhouse. That is where Jane now goes to meet him, and that is where she finds him. She finds him in a disabled status where he doesn't have eyesight. He is injured greatly. He only has his dog with him and some servants there, and he's leading a very, very poverty stricken kind of, as well as disability stricken life, right? And this is where they both paid the karma of the thing that Mr. Rochester hadn't paid in the past. This Bertha burning away Thornfield and enduring, she dies in the end, but before her death, she injures also Mr. Rochester in a disabled manner, that he loses his eyesight, and so he loses the property that was tied to Bertha, as well as he loses the life that was tied to Bertha, and he gets a disability, which is the karmic payment of the fact that he had used someone and he had led to her disability. Like, even though he may not have been majorly responsible for her mental health illness, he was partially responsible for her disability. And because he was partially responsible for her disability, and because he was blind to the fact that what he had karmically done to Bertha, that's why he gets a very direct karmic consequence related to losing his eyesight. Because the blindness of the past that didn't make him see, blindness of money that didn't make him see how the money of tied to Bertha is the reason why he could never attract good loving relationships in his life, and he could only attract good loving relationships after he had karmically done certain good things. Like, he initially he had abandoned Bertha completely, but in Thornfield he had finally eventually decided to take some responsibility of his wife and had put her under a caretaker. That's when he had slowly apart from the other karma he was starting to clear with Adele, he was doing that with Bertha. So like that, he had taken a few steps of karmically good choices, because he had made those finally throughout his life some karmically good choices. He had met Jane, who was his twin flame, but because while meeting his twin flame he didn't make the right choices, he had to lose his eyesight as a consequence of how blind he was to what karmic harm he would have done to Jane, as well as him, as well as Bertha, if he had ended up marrying her. And that's why he got this blindness. But And again, another test of Jane's love for him, which he would never have understood deeply, how deeply Jane loves him, because Jane was not a very verbally expressive lover. She was a very dutiful lover, but she was not verbally always showing her love towards Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester was a more passionate one in verbal, passionate love related things. Whereas, and the fact that Jane left him would have also wounded him in a little manner, definitely wounded him in a way where he might have thought that Jane doesn't love him. But when he called her, his soul was calling Jane. She came because theirs was a soul level love. That's why she came. And also because hers was the right soul level love for him, even though now she is the richer one, even though, and see, the karmic scales have now shifted. He is the poor one now, she is the richer one now. He is the disabled one now, he is the uglier one now, she is now the more beautiful one in some ways, right? So even more beautiful because she is at least more physically able to do many things. So despite all that, even though the scales have now, karmic scales have tipped, but in a twin flame, that is how it is meant to happen. If you see, this is this infinity symbol in twin flames, that is represents twin flames. That infinity symbol represents this, that sometimes in life one partner will have more advantages, socio-economic advantages, social advantages, beauty related advantages, some different advantages, whereas the other partner, divine counterpart, will have a little less advantage seemingly in front of the world. They are both the same soul, so the soul level they are similar souls, but at the external level of human existence and humans perceiving them, one will be considered to be more advantageous as a partner than the other. So while that was happening initially with Mr. Rochester, he was the more socially advantageous partner or socioeconomically advantaged partner. Now she is the more socioeconomic advantage partner. She is the partner with more property and more even physical advantages now. And despite that, because this was a true love, and because the karma is now cleared with Bertha, when Bertha burns away everything, and now Mr. Rochester is not karmically or monetarily tied at all to Bertha. That's why now, the scales have balanced, the karma has been cleared, and the love that was always present between them now gets even deeper when she marries him finally. And he slowly recovers his eyesight also. That eyesight recovery also in the story's end is not just simply people can think, oh, that is just a happy ending the author wanted to write, but it is not a happy ending. When the karma is getting cleared more and more between them, or between other social interactions that they are having as a couple in their life, as they keep clearing the karma, or as he keeps developing the understanding of why the darkness had to be there in his life when there was darkness in his life, as they both realize and develop an understanding about that darkness of their past, that is when he gets healed, and their love also likely gets healed and becomes a better quality love, which is not explored in the end of the book, but that is something you can assume about them if you assume the fact that these two were high level twin flame counterparts of each other. And many things in their storyline does show that they were twin flame counterparts, where they are getting tempted in similar yet different ways, and sometimes they fall for the temptation whereas the other soul doesn't fall for the temptation. And sometimes you have some mirroring experiences, because they were meant to teach you what was the other person going through when something like this would have happened. Like when St. John has proposed to Jane, Jane can understand now the context of what must have gone through with Mr. Rochester also, if Mr. Rochester couldn't understand whether to leave the money or not, because money and security and comfort related to what Mr. Rochester was, what Bertha, being married to Bertha, is offering. And this she understood two times. First time when she left Mr. Rochester, second time when she left St. John's house. Both of the times she understood what it means to a man when they don't have money or they won't have money, what it would mean. And again, because she was a a twin flame, and also because she was the masculine, divine masculine counterpart in the, or a balanced divine masculine feminine energy holding person, because most twin flames will have a balanced masculine feminine energy in them. So that's why Jane was very logical. Jane was also very emotional, both. She was both logical and emotional. And Mr. Rochester was also very logical and emotional. But Mr. Rochester shows more of his emotions, Jane shows less of her emotions. And though they are the same soul, that is how it is going to manifest, because as a twin flame you're always in a infinite spectrum. So one will be showing one aspect of humanity, another will be showing the slightly opposite aspect of humanity, or like the complementary aspect of human nature, and which is what they were both demonstrating only via their life journey. So I hope this was insightful. Anyone has questions, comments, and would like to open up any discussion related to this book or any other book you might want to have a soul level discussion about the spiritual aspects related to the story that you have read in a past or in the present, please drop a comment, and if I know the story or I find that story intriguing, I will make more further videos about these topics. And thank you for listening. Have a great day.